Refugee Blues by W.H.Auden. W.H.Auden was born into a middle-class family in York in 1907. He was educated at Gresham School, York, and Christ Church, Oxford. In his early career, he tried to imitate Thomas Hardy, but before long he came under the influence of T.S. Eliot, Stephen Spender, and other members of the Pylon School. His first volume of poems came out in 1930. His second volume of poems, The Orators, came out in 1932. He took part in the Spanish Civil War as an ambulance driver and stretcher bearer, taught for a while in the pre-Hitler Germany. In 1935, he married and settled in the United States of America. This brought about a radical change in his poetic career and life vision. In the 1930s, Auden seemed a Marxist poet. He was considerably influenced at this stage by Marx and Freud. Still, he displayed admirable fluency and a wide range. Perhaps his own statement in the introduction to the Poet's Tongue. Poetry is not concerned with telling people what to do, but with extending our knowledge of good and evil, perhaps making the necessity for action more urgent and its nature more clear, but only leading us to the point where it is possible for us to a rational and moral choice. During this period, the 30s, Auden wrote some plays: The Dog Beneath the Skin, The Ascent of F6, and On the Frontier, probably to give a telling expression to political, social, and moral concern. Christopher Isherwood was his collaborator in these plays. However, there was a marked change in the 1940s in Auden towards the religious Christian vein. In this period, he was moved by Kierkegaard and Reinhold Niebuhr. Auden also authored some fine prose pieces: The Enchanted Flood, The Dyer's Hand, Forwards and Afterwards, and Secondary Worlds. Auden's poetry is noted for his concern with contemporary issues, versatility, technical virtuosity, and conversational idiom. Auden is a worthy inheritor and talented propagator of the Eliot tradition. His passionate involvement in the political and religious causes he has championed gives his writing about them a genuine poetic quality, with the result that he is simultaneously intellectual and emotional, witty and sincere, while technically he has been significantly successful in fitting the most natural modern languages into a great variety of traditional stanza forms and myths. This poem, Refugee Blues, was written in 1939. The poem describes the condition of Jewish refugees during the period of Nazi Germany, with a particular emphasis on how they were discriminated against and antagonized. During the Second World War, Jews were forced to flee persecution and violence in Nazi Germany. Many Jews were unable to secure asylum in countries like England or US because they kept tight quotas on the number of Jewish immigrants admitted each year. It raises broader questions about isolation, loneliness, and exile. It depicts the trauma and pain of being forced to leave home and of being unable to find a place of safety and security in a violent and uncertain world. Refugee is a person who is forced to leave his country in order to escape war, persecution, or natural disaster. The use of the word refugee implies that the poem is about a person or a group of people attempting to escape their country, Nazi Germany, but cannot due to the fact that they do not own passports, leaving them homeless. Blues refers to a song of sadness and mourning. When the poem begins, the speaker says that the current city he is in has 10 million people. Rich people are living in mansions, whereas poor people are living in holes. Yet there is no place for German Jews. The speaker says that once they lived in a country and believed it to be their own, but they were denied their rights. That place is still there in the atlas, but the refugees and his companion cannot go there. In this stanza, the poet shows the contrast between nature and the refugees, as there is always a new hope for natural life. It renews, unlike the refugees. This is a metaphor that captures new life, opportunity, and progression. This line indicates the helplessness of the refugees to go back to a safe place because they could not get their passports renewed. In anger, the consul banged the table and said that if the refugee was not having passport, then officially he was dead, but the refugee and his companion were alive. Even people in authority refused to help, and the state didn't really care about the refugees. It also depicts that without passports, they were simply nobody. The refugee went to a committee. They offered him a chair to sit and politely asked him to come next year, but they were unable to help him, and the refugee had no place where he could go. He went to a public meeting and heard a speech. This stanza emphasizes that the people were unwilling to help the refugees and felt threatened by them. People were afraid of the couple and thought that they would steal their bread. The impersonal language them also captures the hostility towards the refugees. This line indicates that the couple was in danger as they heard Hitler addressing his men, mentioning that the Jews didn't deserve to live. This threat of death hung over them. The poet highlights the contrast between the condition of the couple and the animals. The cats were allowed to enter anywhere they wanted, but German Jews weren't. Their condition was worse than animals. The refugee went down the harbor and saw the fish swimming and enjoying their freedom. They were only 10 feet away from the refugee, but unlike the refugee, they were free. While walking through the wood, the refugee noticed birds singing freely in the trees because politicians had not made their life hell. Their condition was better than human beings. In his dream, he saw a building with 1,000 rooms, but there was not even a single room for German Jews. This stanza not only gives an image of coldness and death, but also of survival in challenging situations. The soldiers were not looking for them particularly, but they were looking for German Jews. Here, the speaker wants to highlight the tragedy and fear of the personal experience as well as the collective experience. Here, the writer uses hyperbole to show the immense number of soldiers after them and how they were outnumbered. This poem gives a pretty accurate description of the situation of Jews under Hitler's rule. It is to show the people the plight of their fellow humans, and just because they were Jews, they were denied basic rights. An indirect appeal to show compassion for humanity irrespective of the community is the theme of the poem. Auden tries to gain sympathy and compassion for the Jews. He blames the soldiers for their brutality and inhumanity as they kill the innocent people. He also strongly suggests that the countries that turn the speaker away share a good deal of the blame and responsibility. They had the power to save the speaker and failed to do so. He shows the human nature of Jews and how they wish to be free and safe like other human beings. The narrator and his companion were forced to flee persecution and violence in Nazi Germany. They were terrified of returning to Germany, but also were unable to find a safe haven in countries like England or US because they kept tight quotas on the number of Jewish immigrants admitted each year. The speaker tried to seek asylum in an unnamed country in Europe, but that country frustratingly turned the speaker away. When the consul asked for the passports, the narrator and his companion replied that their passports had expired. The consul became angry and shouted that if they had no passports, they were officially dead. When the narrator went to the committee to get the passports renewed, they offered him a chair to sit and asked him to come back next year. The narrator was disheartened and shocked because he did not know where to go. The narrator saw the fish swimming at the harbor as if they were free. He also saw the birds singing freely in the woods. They were all having better lives than he and his companion, a couple of Jews. There were no constraints and politicians to bind them. This shows the fallen state of the humans. The freedom that the fish and the birds enjoyed was not given to the Jews. The refugee saw a huge building with thousands of rooms in his dream, but none had their names written over it. This shows that there was no place for the refugee to reside. He remembers how, when he stood on the plains and looked through the falling snow, he could see 1,000 soldiers marching towards them, looking for them to kill them. The tone of the poem is melancholic. It is depressing and devastating. The dire plight of the Jews is presented starkly, making the readers uncomfortable, which is its idea. There are a total of 12 stanzas, each having 3 lines in the poem. The rhyme scheme is A, B. The last words or the first 2 lines of each stanza rhyme with each other. There is some imagery when the speaker speaks of the yew in the churchyard blooming in spring each year. The thunder rumbling in the distance is a metaphor for the orders of Hitler, which read, "Kill all Jews." The last line of each of the 12 stanzas has a part of it repeated in itself. For example, "Only 10 feet away, my dear, only 10 feet away." This repetition is effective in emphasizing the content of the individual stanzas. Thank you.